Hey guys, it's Greg with JHDrums.com bringing you another drum mixing tutorial. In today's video, we're going to continue with processing the snare drum. In the previous video, we went over how I EQ the snare drum. And in today's video, we're going to continue by looking at compression. Now, compression, of course, is a means of controlling the dynamics of our snare. Basically taming the transients. You know, the initial hit is going to be louder than the tail of the sound of our snare, but it's also a way to control the tone, and we can examine that further within our compression plugin. If you'll notice here, within this particular song, I've got a real heavy transient on the intro, but then if you notice here, it softens out in the verse. So the actual hits are nowhere near as loud as they were in the intro. Of course, it picks back up, and the chorus softens back out, and it just goes to show that the snare is, in most cases, in most songs, it's one of the most heavily played drums and one of the most dynamic drums that we have in our drum mix. So we need to tame that and make the best use of compression in order to highlight each part of those parts in the song. So what we'll do, in Logic, we will grab a compression plugin. What we'll do is go to our insert channel. We'll go to Dynamics, Compressor, and Mono. I'm going to go ahead and solo the snare bus so we have a way to hone into the snare so we can just listen to it and monitor it. And we'll just go ahead and bypass it and take a listen to what it sounds like as is. It's a real transient heavy, you know, the peaks of the snare, you know, the initial hit are standing out way too much, and that's what we're going to use the compression for. Just grab, you know, a preset. Any of your favorite plugins will work. I'm going to use an SSL emulated setting here. And what I like to, when I'm compressing snare, I like to start with a ratio of 3:1 and a tack setting of 4 milliseconds, a release of around 200 milliseconds. And then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and engage the compressor. I will listen to a transient heavy section, which is this right here, which I've selected with our loop. And what I'll do is I will adjust our threshold until we're getting anywhere between 3 to 6 dB of gain reduction. So let's go ahead and do that, adjust our threshold, and get the reduction that we need. I'm going to bring our gain makeup down because we'll look at that later. But notice I'm not going anywhere over the negative 6 dB range in our gain reduction meter. Okay, so that's cool. The next thing I'll look at is the attack of the snare. And this is a way to shape the tone of the actual sound that we get out of our compressor output. The attack is going to be responsible for when the compressor kicks in. It's going to say, okay, I'm going to allow 4 milliseconds from the initial hit, and then I'm going to start to clamp down. And what that can do audibly is change how loud our initial hit is. How much of that do we want in our snare sound? So check this out. Listen to the tonal changes that happen when I adjust this, basically increasing the attack length, decreasing it, and then also watch the gain reduction change as I adjust the attack. So we'll increase it. Of course, the initial transient is more prominent, but we're getting less of a reduction because we have more of that snare coming, allowing the snare to come through more without compressing. And now if I bring it down, if I bring it down to nothing, basically, notice how we're compressing a ton more because we're compressing the entire signal. But that initial peak is just killed. I mean, it's completely grabbing everything. So that's what we want to pay attention with our attack. So let's start with 2, and then we'll kind of go up and down until we find a happy medium. And use your ears. Try to find the best position that you like to blend how much of that first snap, the attack that you want, how much of that you want in your snare, or how little you want, and adjust it to taste. See, to me, that's taking a little bit too much away. And again, over the 4 millisecond range, having too much of the attack in. And I'm happy with 4 milliseconds. It's a nice balance. The next thing to look at is going to be our release. And if we just listen here, we can listen how the release shapes our tone as well. So right now we're at 200 milliseconds. Let's go ahead and decrease that. See how the reduction meter is just flashing? And then if I increase it, and in that case, it's, you know, really, it's a really long release, and it's just unnecessary for that sharp of a transient, which our snare produces. So the idea with our release, if we zoom in, well, let's go ahead and zoom into our top snare mic. What we want to do, and this is just to better visualize it, but this is the transient, and we've allowed 4 milliseconds of a attack. So that's what's coming through. And then we're compressing the rest of this. And what we want to do is with our release is match the sound of our snare, basically the sounding or the tail of this hit to the timing of our release setting. And, you know, you don't have to go into the grid here and map it out, but just use your ears and try to find that when that snare hits, that gain reduction kicks in, and then it's released basically back to 0 before the next snare hits. Now I do have some more intricate snare work in there, so I might want to keep my release a little bit shorter. If you have a longer, you know, maybe a ballad, or, you know, just not as fine, you know, snare hits, you might want to increase the release to capture more of that tone. So, I mean, that's really, the release can really shape how much of that fullness and roundness that you can get out of your snare. If we increase it too much, it's going to really clamp down. But if we find the right balance, it's going to bring out the softer intricacies of the snare, and at the same time tame down that initial slap or transient. So the next thing that I'll probably do is, and this is my general practice for gain makeup on any compression setting, on any source, what I'll do is I'll bypass and I will listen to the volume of the snare, and then I'll engage it and I'll see how much gain I need to make up. And then by bypassing and engaging, we'll try to match the volume that we get out of our compression after it's compressed the initial signal. So let's go ahead and try to do that here. So this is bypassed. And then if I engage it, see how it takes that initial peak and makes it quieter? That's where we want to increase our gain. So let's do that again. I'm going to bypass it, we'll play it, and we'll see if I increase it by 3 dB. We'll bypass it and engage it, and we'll see where our volumes are comparatively. So bypassed and engaged. Bypassed. So I think the initial, around 2.5, 3 dB is going to be fine. When we're doing this, we want to listen to that first hit. Of course, the compression is bringing out the body of the snare, so it's going to kind of trick your ears. It's going to sound louder because you have more, you have an increasing gain on the softer part of the sound of one hit. But pay attention to that peak, match it by bypassing, and increase your gain to match the overall output. And that way, we've actually tamed the transient, but we've increased the tone of the snare, the softer hits, the ghost notes. It's a great way to bring out just the parts of the snare that get buried without this compression. So it's real transient heavy. And those ghost notes come right back in. Let's bring this down to about 21. Now, the attack, the release, the ratio, I mean, those are all just general settings. And you can use those just, to start with. But really, when compressing, it's all about using your ears. It's not necessarily the numbers. I don't care if this goes all the way down to -90 if it's necessary. Use your ears and get the sound that you want. Almost close your eyes. Select this, close your eyes, and bring it up and down until you're happy with what you're hearing. Don't worry about the numbers. Trust me, you'll worry yourself to death about having things where they need to be when all that matters is the sound of the instrument. Let's play around with the ratio, and we could see what that does to the tonal sound of our drum, as well as the compression, the amount of reduction that we get. And notice that when I bring it up, I'll go ahead and bring it up to about 6 dB. Notice how it really crushes the snare. Because we're at 3-to-1 here. 4-to-1. So our gain reduction is popped up and up into the 6 range. It's really, now that could be a totally cool sound. You can get a lot more gain makeup out of that. You just have to increase your threshold. But to me, 6-to-1 on this dynamic of a drum is going to be overkill. And that's why I like, around 3-to-1, 4-to-1 on the ratio setting. So, that's just a real quick overview of compression, guys. Use these as just a starting point, but, close your eyes, make sure that the sound that you want is what you're getting out of your compression, and it'll lead to much better drum mixes, much more headroom, and just overall better sounding mix. So just for an example, in this softer part here, I'll go ahead and turn off the loop. Notice how I'll bypass the compression, and we'll play it, and then I'll engage it, and notice how the ghost notes start to come out when it's engaged. So this is bypassed, non-bypassed, or engaged rather. Now remember, I increased the gain, but I've also compressed. So we're really, we're at the same level. So that's the beauty of compression, is I get to control those transients, and I get to shape the tone and put the snare, more up front. This is bypass. Engage. I'll go ahead and bypass. You hear the subtle parts of the snare, with all those ghost notes and rolls coming out. That's really what we want the compression to do. We want it to tame the transients, shape the tone, and make the parts that are softer more audible. So let's go ahead and with our snare bus soloed, we'll We'll just preview in a heavier part with it bypassed for about 2 bars, and then I'll engage it for 2 bars. Do this again. And let's do the same thing in the perspective of the whole mix, because that's really where we're going to be. So bypass 2 bars and engage on this following 2. Notice it's not, you know, a severe difference because we're not compressing super heavy, but we are in turn, you know, by doing it more subtle, doing a more subtle compression rather, we're bringing out the parts that we previously weren't hearing because the transients were overtaking them. So that's the idea of compression, guys. Implement it next time you're mixing drums and make better drum mixes. If you have any questions, again, leave them in the comments below. I will get back to you as soon as I've seen them. I will try to provide the best answers that I can. And look forward to the next snare processing video, because we are going to get into noise gating. And that is a big thing when it comes to providing headroom for your mix. Get rid of the cymbals, you know, and only highlight the snare when it needs to be there. So stay tuned for that, guys. Again, Greg for JHDrums. Appreciate you hanging in with me, and I will see you in the next video. Have a good one.